holders, and I would move that we agree to the committee amendments.
Thank you, Senator. Actually, do you want to waive the reading?
I don't know that that's... This is a committee amendment. We usually don't waive the reading on those.
It's not in the calendar, so we should waive the reading.
You told us not in the calendar, so we should just waive the reading, just to procedurally be in the good place.
I move that the committee amendments, the reading of the committee amendments, be waived.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the reading of the committee amendments be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the committee amendments is waived. Senator from Western Fairfax, Senator Marsden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the committee amendments be agreed to.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee amendments are agreed to. Senator from Western Fairfax, Senator Marsden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move now that we engross the bill and advance it to its third reading.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed in advance to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed in advance to its third reading. Senator from Western Fairfax, Senator Marsden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I now move that we suspend the rules and dispense with the third constitutional reading.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the rules be suspended and the third constitutional reading be dispensed with? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 40, no 0.
Ayes 40, no 0. The rules are suspended and the third constitutional reading is dispensed with. Senator from Western Fairfax, Senator Marsden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the bill pass. And speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendments, committee amendments to this bill return it to its original posture, but it adds a reenactment clause. A reenactment clause. 33 years ago, Mr. President, we defined small business as a business with basically receipts of over $10 million or 250 employees or less. Because of inflation over that time, 95% of Virginia businesses qualify as a small business. When 95% are small businesses, nobody's really a small business. And this has been a difficult one to solve. It was 33 years ago we did this. 15 years we've been trying to solve it. And I don't believe this bill is, in its current form, is going to become law, but we need it. We need it because JLARC is going to conduct a study looking at other states and how they define small business, and it would behoove us to have a benchmark that they can compare those other states to. This comes from a study from the Small Business and Diversity Agency here in the state, which a study was done with VCU. So this is as good as we can get it right now. But we need to engage the small business community. We've heard from some, but not from too many small businesses. We need to get them engaged. We need JLARC to have this as a benchmark to measure what other states are doing against. So it is a vehicle to move it forward. It's been defanged by the reenactment clause. And I want to work this in the off-season here with JLARC to come up with a really good definition of small business so small businesses actually have the advantage they were designed to have in state contracting. And so I reiterate my motion that the bill pass.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the senior senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove, rise?
Speak to the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I apologize. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that we will not advance this legislation. I've worked with the patron. He's a great guy, and I hate to work against this bill. But what's of paramount importance here is we're redefining small business without really getting the input that we need from the small business communities. Basically, there is a major change in this bill, and that is changing the definition of a small business from a business with less than 250 employees or $10 million in gross receipts averaged over 3 years. This bill changes it to 250 or less employees and $10 million in gross receipts averaged over the last 3 years. As I mentioned before, the profit margins in a lot of different businesses, construction, road building, etc., are very low. They're razor thin now. And I really think this has an opportunity to hurt a lot of people and not help them. I understand the gentleman's desire to try to pare down the small business definition, but I really think without the input of the stakeholders that we found, now there's been a small study that's been done, but I would really like to have more information from all the stakeholders and those who may be impacted by this that have no idea that it's coming. So, Mr. President, unfortunately, I have to oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. For what purpose is Senator from Rockingham? Senator Obenshain rise.
Mr. President, I rise to speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I would urge you to vote against this bill. I really do understand what the gentleman is trying to get at, but by passing a bill, even if it's got a reenactment provision on it, I mean, that's not the way to tackle it. We have a JLARC study that is scheduled to begin, and although this bill has gone through, I don't know how many committees, has been reviewed, and every time it's been looked at, there have been more issues that have been identified with it. I have been hearing from small businesses, particularly over the course of the past few days. They are gravely concerned about this. And one additional thing I would point out is that what this bill, one of the things among others that this bill does is it defines gross receipts as net receipts. It mischaracterizes them. I know that my friend, the former senior senator from Henrico, would be aghast at that notion by taking taking cost of goods sold out of the definition of gross receipts. It's not. This bill has a lot of issues. I think we would be well advised to let JLARC take a look at it and to come back with a real plan, rather than one that we're cobbling together at the 11th hour.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the senior senator from Virginia Beach? Senator Wagner rise.
Mr. President, speaking briefly to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
I would have hoped that this Commonwealth would have adopted years ago the federal classification for small business. But let me tell you some of the pitfalls in here. I spent most of my career in the shipbuilding, ship repair industry. The definition at the federal level for a small business shipyard is less than 1,000 employees. And you ask yourself, well, why so big? Why so? It takes at least 40 to 50 employees just to cover all the different trades on that, to cover all the different trades involved in a ship repair operation or shipbuilding operation. We're getting ready to move down this road, and we just don't know how many businesses and other trades outside of what I used to work in is going to be impacted by this. Who's going to be cut out of the opportunity to bid that would otherwise be a small business? The federal codes for so many different things vary on gross receipts. A small business manufacturing company probably has to have receipts of $30 to $40 million a year to justify any kind of manufacturing line. I can't see that we go in here willy-nilly without the impact to all different kinds of companies based on and less than $10 million. Now, in some businesses, that might be plenty, and that might be something that qualifies as a big business. But I can assure you in many industries across this Commonwealth that the small business definitions outlined by the federal industrial classification codes do recognize what a true small business is, and I would hope we'd defeat this bill.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1098? Senator from Western Fairfax, Senator Marsden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to wrap up, I believe that the gentleman from Rockingham heard from his small business constituents because this bill was out there. What we need to do is to get people's attention. We've tried to solve this for 33 years since we first began that definition in 1986. I recognize the flaws in the bill, but my understanding of the JLARC study is that they're going to look at other states, not try to define what it is in Virginia. This is a vehicle for getting people out of the woodwork, engaged in this process, and trying to solve this so that small businesses get what they deserve in the Commonwealth, which is an opportunity to bid on state contracts and not have to compete against large businesses. Right now, 250 employees, you could have, under the current law, you can have revenue of $1 billion and qualify as a small business. We need to get this process going. This is a process bill. It's not designed to ultimately pass, but let's get it down the road and show Virginia that we're serious about solving this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Question is, shall Senate Bill 1098 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 18, noes 22.
Ayes 18, noes 22. Senate Bill 1098 fails.
Senate Bill 1671, a bill relating to charitable gaming, special permit for the play of electronic versions of instant bingo, pull tabs, or seal cards, or on certain premises. Reported, we have one floor amendment.
Senator from Prince William County, Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to reconsider the vote which we engrossed and advanced the bill to its third reading.
Question is, shall the vote by which the bills engrossed and advanced to its third reading be reconsidered? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 0.
Ayes 39, noes 0. The motion is agreed to. Senator from Prince William, Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to waive the reading of the floor amendment.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the reading of the floor amendment be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor amendment is waived. Senator from Prince William, Senator McPike.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of the floor amendment. And speaking to that motion,
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, this changes and provides sort of some curbs to the original language. It provides and allows up to 4 machines in the places that sell alcohol to on-lights premise license. So this would provide a little bit more quantity that we're setting in this code. And with that explanation, I move the passage of the amendment.
Thank the Senator. The question is, what purpose, Senator from Lynchburg, Senator Peake Rise?
To speak to the bill.
To the amendment? We're doing
Not to the amendment, sorry.
Okay.
Wait to the bill. Excuse me.
No problem. Question is, shall the floor amendment be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The floor amendment is adopted. Senator from Prince William, Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move we engross and advance the bill to its third reading.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed and advanced to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and advanced to its third reading. Senator from Prince William, Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we suspend the rules and dispense with the third constitutional reading.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the rules be suspended and the third constitutional reading be dispensed with? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 1.
Ayes 39, noes 1. The rules are suspended and the third constitutional reading is dispensed with. Senator from Prince William, Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill pass. And speaking to that motion,
The Senator has the floor.
What this bill does, ladies and gentlemen, is really level the playing field for your local Moose Lodge, VFW, American Legions, and other charitable gaming organizations within your localities. Many of you are aware, I think the Senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove, has indicated a growth of private machines that have been actually consuming a lot of the activity that have gone to our local charitable gaming organizations. This seeks to level the playing field, and with the amendment today, would allow for electronic pull-tab devices into places that have ABC license and premise. And so this would really help these organizations that have been losing revenue and doing so much good work in our communities to start to recover some of those funds and help our communities. So with that, Mr. President, I move the bill pass.
Thank you, Senator. For what purpose, the Senator from Lynchburg, Senator Peake Rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. This seems to be the time I'm supposed to speak about this bill.
The floor is yours, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Originally, I met with the folks from the VFW and the Moose Lodge. They came through, and I thought they had a package of bills that I thought was to protect what they were doing at the Moose Lodge and at the VFW halls. And we had the amendment yesterday, and I joked with some of my seatmates. It's nice, so we're now moving these in only into places where you can drink, so we don't want anybody gambling if they're not drinking. But I still thought it was going to be at the VFW halls and the Moose Lodges. But my understanding is that this bill is allowing those charitable organizations to move these machines into any drinking establishment. Your neighborhood bar, your Applebee's, your Outback Steakhouse. Every place in the Commonwealth that serves alcohol can now have some type of these slot gambling machines. That is not what I wanted to happen with the charitable industries. And so I just want people to realize, and I spoke with the patron and he confirmed what I said, that this bill is allowing your charitable entities, VFW, Moose Lodge, to put gambling machines in any drinking establishment in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the senior senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove, rise?
Speak to the bill, Mr. President.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, actually, the bill doesn't allow these machines in every drinking establishment. The way that the code is right now, they're already allowed. They can already go to any establishment. They can already be in an Applebee's. They can already be in a truck stop. What this bill does is ensures that the charitable gaming that used to be just bingo, which is slowly going away, at least now the VFW, the American Legion, the FOP, the Moose Lodge, other charitable organizations can actually get something out of those machines. Now, Mr. President, the other thing is, Virginia doesn't get anything out of those machines. We don't get any tax. We don't get any licensing. We don't get anything. And that's a story for another bill. But at least with this bill, some of our charities who used to depend on that bingo revenue that basically is dwindling away will have an opportunity to get money to put into these organizations. The FOP in Chesapeake spends all kinds of time and hours in the bingo halls in order to generate that revenue so they can help the people in the city of Chesapeake. Let's help the VFW. Let's help the American Legion. Let's help the Moose Lodge. At least give them a shot to get something out of these machines that Virginia isn't getting now. So I hope you'll support the bill.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is Senator from Roanoke County, Senator Suderline, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. To speak to the bill briefly.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, first I want to thank the Senator from Prince William for offering the amendment he just did. You saw it flew out of committee on a 14 to Suderline vote. So I don't think I was going to be able to rally 21 negative votes against it on the floor. But one of my greatest concerns with the bill as it was originally formed was the incentive for these organizations, which are great organizations, do good things, to have an unlimited amount of these. And that was one of my greatest concerns. I still have a fundamental opposition to how this goes about some of the things that the senator from Lynchburg said. But I just wanted to thank the senator from Prince William. I understood he had the votes to get the bill in its earlier form, but I think he really, even though we disagree on this, he really did what he thought best for the Commonwealth, and I appreciate that.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1671? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1671 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 29, noes 11.
Ayes 29, noes 11. Senate Bill 1671 passes.
Senate Bill 1355, a bill to allow closure of certain coal combustion residuals impoundments.
Senior Senator from Virginia Beach, Senator Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill pass. You all will remember this is the proverbial coal ash bill that we've had in front of us Friday, yesterday, and now today. Obviously we had a spirited debate. We went in detail on Friday on this bill. I will say that this bill provides for the permanent solution to the coal ash problem in Virginia for those coal ash piles that are in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. It's one of those things that will take a little over a decade to complete, but once it's done, we will not have to worry in the Commonwealth of Virginia about having a coal ash problem. And I will also note this is one of those 14 to Suderline votes. So with that, Mr. President, I would renew my motion that the bill pass.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1355? One person Senator from Roanoke County, Senator Suderline, rise.
Well, if no one else is going to speak, I think someone needs to address this. Like it was pointed out, I voted against even a re-referral from agriculture because I thought this is where it ought to be. I did not like the idea of it going to commerce and labor. And so I just want to reflect on what we've done. in the last few years, this General Assembly in 2015 passed legislation to freeze the electric rates. And I believe that took the constitutional authority away from the State Corporation Commission. I understand only one of the justices of the State Supreme Court agreed with me. He was the only one that got it right. And there was debate at the time about freezing the electric rates and if that was a good idea. And I understand folks tried to do their best on it, but several of us that were concerned pointed out that the corporations that had a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders were telling us electric rates were about to go up. I said, I'm not an energy expert, but I can tell you if they're telling you they want to freeze the rates, they don't actually believe that the rates are about to go up. It should be that obvious to us. But the General Assembly and the current governor and his position at the time thought that was fine policy. And folks had the rates frozen. Those of us that thought they were going to be artificially high were correct, and Virginians overpaid for those years. Last year, the General Assembly unfroze those rates, and the governor again backed that bill, but it was done in such a way that virtually guaranteed that future over-earnings would go into projects that would benefit the investors, and a lot of them will benefit the ratepayers, but not at prices that the State Corporation Commission would have allowed. And that's something that this General Assembly did then. And in between 2015 and now, there have been multiple rate adjustment clauses where the General Assembly has put its thumb on the scale for the benefit of these electric monopolies. And they're doing quite well. And now this year, we've got a bill before us that seeks to address something that these electric monopolies have done for several years. And I'm not saying that they violated any laws, because I know that's something people keep saying. But what they did was what they thought was in the best interest of their investors at the time, and they did quite well. And now we've got a bill before us today that's going to stick the bill to the ratepayer every month for several years. And so the same companies, and I take that back, the same company, because there's only one company addressed by this, that has benefited each and every year by this General Assembly's interventions before the State Corporation Commission, will once again get to take more money out of the ratepayers' pockets. And I think we've got a few more bills coming on that as well. We'll see how this session goes. But I was told the other day, this is the governor's bill. Yes, the governor has endorsed each and every one of these actions over the last 5 years. He seems to think of it a lot the same way that the company does, and it inspires no confidence in me to hear that this is a governor's bill, because they've got the exact same viewpoint on this, and I'm, again, disappointed with what I think we're about to do.
Thanks, Senator. For what purpose is Senator from King George? Senator Stuart Rise.
Speak to the bill, Mr. President.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had such a nice debate on this the other day, I thought I would engage my seatmate again. I'm kidding. Absolutely kidding. Mr. President, I tried to offer amendments, and the wisdom of this body declined them, and I accept that. And I'm not a sore loser. I think it's important that we support this bill despite the fact that it's not perfect. This is an important issue. We need to get it resolved. We need to have this stuff removed from these coal ash ponds, and we need to try to use it as beneficially as we can. And so I hope everybody will support this bill. And, Mr. President, I will tell you that I still believe my seatmate would make a fine trial lawyer.
Them's fighting words. For what purpose is Senator from Fairfax City, Senator Petersen, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I just couldn't help myself. This bill has some good parts to it. And I want to talk a little bit about the growth of this body. There was a time when you could have had a bill that would have had an unrestricted return on equity put on the floor here, and it would have sailed right through and nobody would have said anything. And thankfully, we're kind of past that. At a minimum, we put up a fight, and I think we have put some good restrictions on this. I'm still concerned about the return on equity as represented in lines 89 through 90. And so at this point, I'm still going to vote red because I still think we can tighten it up some more, but I agree that it is good to move this thing along. I do have to relate one anecdote. The gentleman from Roanoke County actually got his first experience in politics campaigning against me. And if that's not ironic, the person he was campaigning for occasionally speaks on behalf of the very utility he condemns. But that's okay. It was all good, and he does a fine job. But I do agree with both sides. There are some good parts here. I think that we're getting a little bit more sophisticated in how we look at these bills. I think that's a good thing, but I think this one can be better also. Thank you.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose the Senator from Chesterfield, Senator Chase Rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak in favor of this bill.
Senator has the floor.
I just want to answer some of the, or make some remarks regards to some of the comments that my seatmate had made, who I highly respect. We've been working on this bill for about 4 years, as Senator Sudolan has mentioned, and I have been one of the biggest, how would you say this? Watchdogs. Thank you. I have been one of the biggest watchdogs of the utility company, and I have opposed legislation that gave the utilities unfettered control over the rates, even down to the judges, and making sure that we selected judges that would have the right oversight. This is a good bill. I, too, was concerned about return on equity. I was concerned that we had an amendment in place, which we took care of yesterday, which would basically say this. And it says that if the utility is found guilty or negligent in any way in violation of any federal or state laws, they would pay those fees. They would pay those penalties. However, each of us who turns on electricity, turns on a light, produces electricity, and produces this coal ash. And for that reason, there is nothing that any utility has done that we have seen and looked at the testing that would say that they have violated this. That said, we've still put the provision in there so that later, if we find out there's some type of contamination or some type of negligence down the road, we have that built in to this bill. And I thank the governor for getting on board. I'm all about being a team player, and so is Senator Servell. And we have a number of stakeholders that have gotten on board on both sides of the aisle, and I'm very appreciative. There's been a lot of work that's gone on this bill, and I would greatly appreciate you putting on a green light on this bill. Thank you.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose does the Senator from Petersburg, Senator Dance, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak in support of the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I will, as one that is on this bill, as one of the chief patrons, I commend all of those who have been on the bills that have come through this body that have not been approved until this one today. There have been those that led up to it. I commend and I'm going to forget the senator from Eastern Fairfax. Did I get it right? Oh, great. Now I got to do a bad job when I commend the gentlewoman from Chesterfield. I can commend the gentleman from, where is he from? Scott Wagner, from the Virginia Beach area. All of them, I want to commend them, but I also commend both the environmental community and the industry that had to come together, and that is the biggest win, because they listened to the constituents who said the things that would be a problem for them if it happened. First, do no harm, and they addressed that. They addressed the trafficking as far as all the trucks that would impede in their abilities to live as they choose or go back and forth from their homes as they choose with 300, maybe 350 trucks for the next 15 years. That was addressed in this bill. Those issues that I heard directly from my constituents through town hall meetings, through small gatherings, they expressed. The people that were instrumental in getting this bill to this floor today listened. So for all the legislators that played a part, most importantly to the governor's staff, his staff, to the industry, to the environmental communities, to everybody that had a part in this. This is really a team effort. And it is bipartisan. There's everybody having something positive in this. It's not perfect. It is not perfect. And I'm sure next year there will be another group that will come that will try to make it better. but this is the best opportunity for us to move this bill forward, and I support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Do any senators other than the patron wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1355? Seeing none, Senior Senator from Virginia Beach, Senator Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just to wrap up, again, I would renew my motion that the bill pass. And speaking just to a couple of comments that I heard, just a little history lesson. We froze the rates in earlier, 2015, I believe, as a result of the Clean Power Plan that was being proposed in Washington, D.C. We were uncertain. It's not the first time we did that. I'll take you back a little further history. When we started down the road of deregulation, we froze the rates again. And thank God we froze those rates, because when we witnessed what happened in other states with deregulation and watched the up to 25, 30% increase in electric rates in Maryland and other neighboring states that went down this road, we resented. We pulled back and we went back to a fully regulated state because we'd seen what had happened in other states and thought that's not a path Virginia wants to take. Let's keep our rates competitive. For the senator from Roanoke County, I will say this, that the utility that we're talking about under this legislation, electric rates are significantly lower than the utility that represents his particular area. And in fact, I would say to those that live in Loudoun County, depending on which side of the county you live on, you're going to pay more for electricity if you're under the co-op than you will if you're into the area that's serviced by the utility. In this case, it happens to be Dominion. So I would point out the disparities of this, but I will say that there is a $100 million a year cost that there is no solution for unless we went down this path, this road, that the ratepayers of Virginia would be paying for forever. And that cost would only go up. This bill solves the problem. There is a little bit of short-term pain, but in the end, we'll be better off, all of us and our kids and our grandchildren will be better off for having dealt with this problem. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator. Question is, shall Senate Bill 1355 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 38, noes 2.
Ayes 38, noes 2. Senate Bill 1355 passes.
Mr. President.
Senator from James City County, Senator Norment.
Mr. President, one of the wonderful things about a deliberate legislative body is that everybody gets to articulate their positions. In the last hour, we have done 8 bills, 2 of which were passed over temporarily or permanently. And I just say we have a long ways to go. I'm certainly not trying to discourage anyone from being articulate.
Thank the Senator.
Senate Bill 1125, a bill to amend and reenact Sections 32.1-102.1 of the Code of Virginia relating to Certificate of Public Need definition of medical care facility.
Senior Senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove.
Thank you, Mr. President. Listening to the eloquent words from the gentleman from James City County, pass my bill. I'm only kidding.
Senator has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, Senate Bill 1125 is really kind of a David and Goliath story. You have David and Goliath, but it's major differences. You know, David doesn't want to kill Goliath in this instance. David just wants to get along with Goliath without getting killed himself. Right now, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the Senate, freestanding emergency departments can spring up anywhere, right next to another competing hospital, in areas that don't really need that other type of health care. I'll give you an example. Certainly in the city of Chesapeake, one of the larger health care providers wanted to put a freestanding emergency department within 2 miles of the existing hospital that has, of course, an emergency department. A couple of problems with that. Emergency departments can act as funnels for insured patients to be sent to that provider's full hospital, or it can also be used as a funnel to make sure that people who are uninsured go to a different hospital. So basically what we're asking for in this bill is for the freestanding emergency departments to be regulated so that that type of abuse does not happen. It's important to note that many patients using freestanding ERs confuse them for urgent care or doc in the box, not understanding that if they go to a freestanding ER, they're going to be paying up to 10 times more than they would have at, let's say, a, quote, patient first. But you've heard a lot of these bills. This really is a very important bill for our area. And with that being said, I don't want to belabor the point, and I'll defer to the gentleman from James City County and ask you to support my bill.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose, Senator from Southern Fairfax? Senator Barker, rise.
Mr. President, to speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I rise to speak in support of this bill. This would, as was stated by the Senator from Chesapeake, what this would do is to provide certificate of public need coverage for freestanding emergency departments. That was the way the law operated for many years until it was changed, not by legislative action, but by administrative decision to count a freestanding emergency department sometimes 20 or 30 miles from a hospital as if it were at the hospital property. I think that was an administrative mistake that was made. This would allow us to address this. There is going to be a study ongoing this year relating to the Certificate of Public Need bill. This would lock things in place for at least 1 year, and then we could have the issue studied during the year. And it would deal with the issue of what some people look at as predatory action from one hospital against another. Thank you.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose, the Senator from Northern Chesapeake? Senator Spruill, rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, members, this is what I was talking about yesterday when I was telling you about the big boys trying to squeeze the little boys out. All this was what I was saying yesterday about the big hospitals coming in, moving in on the small hospital, trying to shut us out. And all we are trying to do is say, hey, that we're a hospital that we're trying to grow and make it what's right for our citizens. This will keep the big hospital coming in and swallowing us up. Thank you.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1125? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1125 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 27, noes 12.
Ayes 27, noes 12. Senate Bill 1125 passes.
Senate Bill 1341, a bill relating to holding handheld personal communication devices while driving a motor vehicle.
Senator from King George, Senator Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move the bill pass. And speaking to that.
Thank you, Senator. You have the floor.
Mr. President, this is what's being affectionately referred to as the hands-free bill. And, Mr. President, I will tell you that I have resisted this year after year, really out of individual freedom. But it's become apparent to me that those other folks who are so engrossed in their phones and completely oblivious to the world around them are now imposing on others individual freedoms. And so what this bill does, very simply, if you look at it, it says it's unlawful for any person while driving a motor vehicle on the highways in the Commonwealth to hold a handheld personal communications device. And I know that's sort of a different way to phrase this, but if you think about it, if we were to say operate a phone while operating a motor vehicle or something like that, the definition of operating is very, very broad. Think of it in terms of a DUI statute. We had a discussion last year, and this Senate passed a bill because of people getting convicted of DUI who were sitting in their own driveways with the engine running, listening to the radio, drinking a beer. That's the same thing you're trying to avoid here with using operating in this statute. I've worked with the House. We have come up with this language. We think it's really good language. And we're hoping that when they've resisted amendments, I hope to resist amendments here to it as well, so that we can actually get a hands-free law that law enforcement can enforce. And I hope it's going to save lives in Virginia. It has just become such an incredible distraction that the time for this has come. And I hope you all will support it. I'll also tell you it does have a delayed enactment clause to January 2020, and there's a significant amount of public education on this issue because we don't want to catch people off guard. We want to give them time to learn what the new law is, to understand that now you either have to put your phone down on the console if you want to use your GPS or use hands-free technology, or you can get one of these little, I don't know what you call it, but it's one of these little plastic things, and you put it on your dashboard and it'll hold your phone there. But if we didn't say you can't hold it, then you wouldn't be able to use your GPS. You wouldn't be able to use hands-free technology because technically, if that phone was on for hands-free technology or GPS, you could be operating it. So I think folks will look at this language and go, wow, that's strange. I don't understand why you do it that way. But that's why, and then I want you to know that. It's good language, it'll work, it's enforceable, and it's time for it. Please support the bill.
Thanks, Senator. For what purpose, Senator from Rockingham? Senator Obenshain rise.
Mr. President, I rise to speak to the bill.
Senator, has the floor.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I support what the senator from Westmoreland is trying to do. As a matter of fact, last year we had a bill that came through both chambers that I thought really did a pretty good job of addressing distracted driving. And for a variety of reasons, we were unable to come to an agreement between the two chambers and the governor's mansion. Really, it wasn't the two chambers that couldn't come to an agreement. It was our inability to come to an agreement with respect to whether it was going to be changed in the post-session process. If we had that agreement, we would have passed that bill. We would have had it signed into law. I think that there are appropriate ways to do this, but take a look at this bill. It highlights some of the challenges with this. If I'm driving down the road holding a cup of coffee, I'm doing nothing wrong. But if I'm driving down the road and take my phone out of my pocket, even just to put it down, I violated the law. If I have an older car and just answer the phone and am talking on the phone like this because it's a speakerphone, I'm in violation of the law. If I'm smoking a cigarette, I'm not in a violation of the law. If I am eating a hamburger with both hands, I'm not in violation of the law. But if I take my phone and simply hold it, that's a violation of law. And remember, we used to be sensitive to the notion of when the police have probable cause to pull somebody over. I don't know whether anybody has any sensitivity to that anymore. I do. And it's not very hard for a law enforcement official who wants a reason to pull somebody over to say, I thought I saw him holding a phone. That gives them grounds to pull you over. Whether you just look funny, they don't like the way you look, they don't like the car that you're driving, they want some pretext to pull you over, that gives it to them. The fact that this has a delayed enactment clause doesn't cure the problem. We passed this bill, it's enacted. It just isn't enforced until a little bit later. If we were to put a reenactment clause on it, or actually come back and amend this and put it in the form that passed last year, I think we'd have a workable bill. But unfortunately, this was taken up while I was not in Courts Committee. I wish I'd been there because I would have had some ideas and thoughts and suggestions and actually did. But I was dealing with the issue of other hazards on Interstate 81 at the time. But this is well-intentioned. I commend the efforts of those who are advancing this. I supported last year's approach. I could be convinced to support that again, but this is just not the right way to do it. I would ask you to vote no.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose, Senator from Spotsylvania? Senator Reeves rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the body, I would just tell you I'm going to put a human face to this a little bit and talk about a little bit about how easy it is to pull over a car, There's certain things in the code section as a former police officer, objects dangling from a mirror. You got one of those Christmas tree type fragrance things on your mirror, we can pull you over for that. So, but here's the real problem. The texting law that we have in place is not enforceable. And I brought this up as a police officer, and before we were talking about this on the floor and how we're going to be able to, we're putting police officers in a precarious position because we can't tell if they're texting or they're talking or anything else. And I happened to be in court in Orange County one day and watched a docket go through, and there were 3 people charged with driving while texting, and all 3 of those people got off because there was no way to prove that unless it was a admission of guilt. And so I want to put the human face on this. In August 27, 2013, a dear friend of mine, Sheriff Steve Dempsey, lost his daughter and 2 grandchildren because somebody was texting on the highway. And he's been down here every year since trying to get something passed. And I think while it's not perfect, I commend the senator from King George for his work on this. I understand the arguments from the chairman of courts. He's a doggone good trial attorney, and I'm sure there'll be opportunities to take this case up. But I think we need to do something because people are dying each and every day because they're out there and they're distracted. I don't see them distracted from smoking a cigarette or even drinking something. It's that phone that keeps ticking off in their head, and they feel like they have to answer it right away. So I would hope we would pass the bill.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator Wagner, rise?
Very briefly, Mr. President, speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, you know, we hear a lot up here, this bill will really save lives, this bill will really save lives. Mr. President, I'm convinced this bill will really save lives. There isn't a single one of us that had been here that hadn't been going down the fast lane, and all of a sudden, why is somebody doing 40 miles an hour in the fast lane? And when you finally get around them or see it, it's their texting. Or you've been in one of the lanes, and all of a sudden the car drifts over and drifts back and drifts off the road and drifts back, and what do you see? They're texting. They're on their cell phone. They're not paying attention. Now, state after state after state has passed this law. I don't see the sky falling down. I don't see all of a sudden all the horror stories that people would tell you going on. This bill actually saves lives. I'm convinced of that. And not only that, but think about if you got kids, grandkids. I don't want them texting. I don't want to running cars into things. And I don't want other people running into my kids or grandkids because they're not, or myself as I go down the road. You can smoke a cigarette and drive the car. I know. I did that for a long time. You're not distracted. You're watching the highway. When you start reading a text, when you start feeling the urge to have to reply, you're not looking at the highway at all. And it's so obvious when you see cars drift all over the road. You don't see that if somebody's having a Diet Coke. You don't see that if somebody's having a cigarette, but you do see it every time with somebody with a cell phone in their hand. So I hope you pass this bill.
Thank you, Senator. For what purpose does the senator from King George, Senator Stewart, rise?
Mr. President, if nobody else wishes to speak.
Do any other senators wish to speak on this bill? Seeing none, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the gentleman from Rockingham, our esteemed chairman of the Courts of Justice Committee, brings up a really good point. And it's something that I'm particularly sensitive to. And defending people for some 30 years, I'm very sensitive to person's civil rights. And someone being profiled, in my opinion, is intolerable. And so if you look on line 61, it talked about pretextual stops, profiling, but it's an invasion of a person's civil rights. That the chairman of the Senate and House committees for courts of justice shall annually request from the office of the executive secretary to report all of the citations issued pursuant to this provisions of this act, and to the extent available, the relevant demographic characteristics of those persons issued a citation. That language is intentional, and that language is intended to try to stop pretextual stops or profiling. I think the best we could possibly do it. The gentleman from Spotsylvania is exactly right. That is a hard thing to do if somebody wants to do it, but I think we've come up with about as good a language as anybody could possibly do to protect from that. So I hope you all will support this bill.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall Senate Bill 1341 pass. All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 34, noes 6.
Ayes 34, noes 6. Senate Bill 1341 passes.
Senate Bill 1526, a bill relating to Certificate of Public Need, psychiatric beds, and facilities.
Senior Senator from Richmond City, Senator Sturdivant.
Mr. President, I move that the bill pass. And speaking to that bill.
Thanks, Senator. You have the floor.
Mr. President, this is a bill that will open up the Certificate of Public Need process in a very narrow area, but an area of health care that is in dire need of more access and more opportunities. We all know the opioid crisis, epidemic really, that's going on in Virginia and around the country. Mental health care and access is also in dire need. And so what this bill does is it removes from the Certificate of Public Need process mental health facilities, psychiatric facilities, and substance abuse treatment facilities so that we can inject some more competition, more access, more opportunity for Virginians who need access to this type of health care to be able to get it. I fully recognize that some of you come from districts where there is only one hospital, and oftentimes they don't like changes to the Certificate of Public Need process. And I would submit to you and ask you to look at this bill in a different way, because we know that we have got thousands and thousands of Virginians dying every year from opioid addiction, opioid overdoses, and other mental health crises. And this is something that is not being sufficiently addressed now, and we need to do more to address it. And this is a bill that will help us to be able to move in that right direction. Virginia, as you probably know, has bounced around from 38th to 42nd worst for access to mental health care, and that's not acceptable. And so with that, Mr. President, I would renew my motion that the bill pass.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose the Senator from Southern Fairfax? Senator Barker rise.
Mr. President, speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I would urge the body to reject this bill as we have done the last couple of years when it's come before us. I understand the proposal and the motivation from the Senator from Richmond City, and it certainly is laudatory there, but I don't think that this is the way to solve the problem. What we need to do is to make the problem we really have right now, and part of the reason that we have gotten low ratings in some years, although actually we're improving significantly now in terms of the Mental Health Association's assessment of our state and access to care, is not that we don't have enough beds. We have plenty of beds, particularly in the private sector, which are the ones who have to go through the Certificate of Public Need process. The problem is that many of the hospitals that have psychiatric beds can't find enough staff to be able to operate all the beds that they have. And that is the reason that we have situations that sometimes have led to people going to state hospitals when there were plenty of empty beds in the local community hospitals, but they just didn't have the staff to be able to provide the services there. What we need to do is not necessarily to get more people into the hospital and more people into emergency departments. One of the things that, and we actually have taken some very progressive steps to move in the right direction over the last 4 or 5 years. Certainly the effort that we've had with the commission that has been led by the Senator from Bath has done made tremendous strides in addressing mental health issues, and we've outlined plans to continue forward. What we need to do is to make sure we have adequate funding for prevention services, which we've not had in the past, and we've now improved that. We need to make sure that we have adequate funding so that everyone who has a mental health problem and says, I have a mental health problem, gets immediate treatment, immediate evaluation, and a treatment plan set in place. With Step 1, Virginia, we are now moving to get all the community services boards in this coming fiscal year on board on that. We also need to have a lot of more supportive housing, in which we have addressed that again this year, both in the budget proposal that's been adopted by the Finance Committee and in legislative action that has been taken. What we have had is situations where there are a lot of people who at one time needed to be hospitalized in state mental health hospitals. They no longer need to be there, and they haven't needed to be there for the last 2 or 3 months, but they're there because we've not had the supportive housing. What we need to do is to have the right services and to not, in effect, overload the system where we don't have enough staff to be able to staff new psychiatric units that might be springing up, or psychiatric hospitals if we did this. It's important that we continue on the path that we're on rather than get diverted to something that I think actually would be counterproductive. And I certainly hope it would be the pleasure of the body to reject this proposal.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1526? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1526 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 14, noes 26.
Ayes 14, noes 26. Senate Bill 1526 fails.
Senate Bill 1550, a bill relating to bicyclists and other vulnerable road users.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Surville.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill pass, and speaking to that motion.
Senator has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, Senate Bill 1550, I believe, does two things. Sorry, I didn't know that was coming up. Two things. Number one, makes clear that you can't use a bicycle lane to pass another vehicle on the right except in an emergency circumstance. The second thing is that it creates a lower standard of where a court can find you guilty of a traffic offense if a vehicle seriously injures a bicyclist or pedestrian. This body has enacted similar enhanced protections for highway workers. We just did yesterday. I think the senator from Williamsburg had a bill. The senator from Grayson had a bill yesterday doing this kind of thing. We have enhanced protections for police officers. We have enhanced protections for school zones. And the senator from Grayson had another bill yesterday having altered enhanced protections to find people guilty if they violate our laws in school zones. This is kind of the same species of that. I want to tell you why we need this. I've been hit by a car 3 times while riding my bike. 3 times. 3 times. Can you believe that? 4 on a 4th. So, that explains it. So, I rode a bike 5,000 miles across the United States of America, got back here, got on my bike the second time. I got hit by a car, put in a hospital right after I got back. Bicycle injuries are up. Pedestrian injuries are up. People are dying across the country on a more frequent basis. They're dying in Virginia on a more frequent basis. DMV emailed me stats this morning. I've been lucky, I guess. But since 2014, when 90 pedestrians were killed, last year 123 pedestrians were killed. So that's an increase of almost 50% in the last 4 years of people getting killed every day. 19 other states have adopted this. These are called a vulnerable user law. I'm not going to read off all the states, but the reason we need this is because frequently when pedestrians are struck by vehicles and cyclists are struck by vehicles, they don't know what happened. They get a concussion. They can't remember what happened. They can't testify as a witness, and frequently there is no witness. There's also harder to get evidence when a cyclist or pedestrian's hit because there's no forensic evidence left when a person or a vehicle hits, or a person or a cycle hits a car. And so it's harder to prove a case. The lack of property damage makes it hard to prove. And so a lot of other states have gone to a reduced standard for traffic liability. Reckless driving just doesn't work in these situations, and that's why we need to make it either careless or distracted driving that approximately causes a serious injury to somebody. Happy to answer any questions, but I would hope the bill pass.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senator from Fairfax City, Senator Petersen, rise?
Gentleman, yield for a question.
Senator, yield.
I'll yield.
You have the floor.
I would ask him, first of all, if a vulnerable road user would include somebody pushing a grocery cart.
Senator has the floor.
Yes, especially if it's full of coal ash. All right, thank
you. Next question.
Further question.
Thank
Further
you.
questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask the gentleman, what is, for sort of a compound question, what is 46.2-852, and it talks about the preclusion. Can you explain that?
Senator, the floor.
What that would say is that if a person is convicted of this, they couldn't be convicted of reckless driving.
All right. I thank the gentleman.
Thanks, Senator. For what purpose does the senior senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
If we were just talking about bicycles, that'd be one thing. But what troubles me is what in the language of the bill defines as a vulnerable road user. It means any pedestrian or a person operating a bicycle, electric personal assistive mobility device, electric power-assisted bicycle, wheelchair, skateboard, roll-in-line or roller skates, foot scooter, or an animal-drawn vehicle or riding an animal. So I guess this is just, as I read this, it's anything that might be on the road, whether it has hooves or wheels or feet. So I mean, it just seems so broad that I just, if the gentleman would explain to me why all of these things are left in there and maybe some things are left out, like hoverboards or whatever, I'd be interested to hear that. Thank you.
Senator has the floor.
I'll yield.
Senator, yield for a question.
I think that's a question.
Okay. You can answer that question. Senator has the floor.
So I can just tell the gentleman, I took this model statute from the model that's been enacted and that the NCSL created that I think has been enacted in 19 other states. Legislative Services came up with this list for me. I think the intent is to have things that are either human-powered or not powered by a gas or electric, well, I guess electric motor is a bicycle, but not powered by a gas motor. That's what we came up with. It does not include motorcycles, does not include mopeds. They go faster. So it's typically things that go a lot slower. Although I can tell you I've been 60 miles an hour on my bike coming off some mountains.
All right, thanks. Senator, do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1550? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1550 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 23, noes 17.
Ayes 23, noes 17. Senate Bill 1550 passes.
Senate Bill 1614, a bill relating to certificates of public need.
From Hanover, Senator McDougall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that Senate Bill 1614 pass. And speaking to the motion,
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, this is another bill that deals with COPN, but it is very limited in its focus.
The Senate will come to order. The senators will please take their seats. Senator from Augusta, Senator Hanger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I arrived for a brief announcement.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. As the members would have observed earlier today, as you arrived, you found the amendments to our budget that was reported out of committee this past Sunday afternoon on your desk for your perusal. I'd also like to mention, Mr. President, that as we had a deadline for getting those on your desk and online by noon today, and Mr. President, I really would like to compliment our Senate Finance staff because we gave them a tight window to get this work done, but they did comply. So if you're sitting here after a while and get to those points in the afternoon where some of our attorney friends feel the need to talk to each other over bills, you can go online and review the budget amendments. As we sit here, you just simply go on the LIS system under the state budget, and under that you go look for the amendments reported out of the committee on Sunday. So you got a hard copy here, and they're online. While I'm making this announcement, Mr. President, I'd also like to point out on behalf of Senator Norment and I that tomorrow during our deliberations we will at some point take a recess and gather everybody in the old Senate chambers so the Senate Finance staff can brief everyone on the details of the budget amendments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the senator from Petersburg, Senator Dance, rise?
Mr. President, I rise for an introduction.
Thank you, Senator. We'll return to the morning hour without objection. Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, in the gallery, I see a few distinguished men, but one stands out, Mr. President. He has poise. He looks like he's a man that takes charge of things, that he can steer young men in the right direction. He can make them successful. He can help them rise to the level of senator. And guess what, Mr. President? He just happens to be the father of the Honorable Jeremy McPike. Mr. President, would you please extend a warm welcome of the Senate to Mr. Ed McPike, Sr.
I thank the senator. Would Mr. Ed McPike, Sr. please rise in the gallery if you're able? Mr. McPike, thank you so much for being here with us today in the Senate. It's a special treat for all of us to have our families here, but particularly I know for Jeremy, Senator McPike, he speaks the world of you, and you've done a great job raising him and raising a great family, and I know you're very proud of every single one of them, and of course you're welcome back here anytime as a member of the Senate family. We echo the eloquent words of the senator from Petersburg, Senator Dance, and I would ask everyone please.
Mr. President, before you do that.
Please.
Would you please also recognize that he is the grandfather to one of our pages who, little Miss McPike, gave our Pledge of Allegiance this morning?
Oh, very good. That's right. That's right. And so you are also a proud grandfather to Aaron Olivia McPike, who did a great job this morning with the Pledge of Allegiance. So you have so much to be proud of and just a beautiful, wonderful family. And I would ask everyone please to join me in extending the warmest welcome of the Senate to our friend Ed McPike, Sr. Do any other senators wish to be recognized for purpose of an introduction? Seeing none, the clerk will call the calendar.
Regular calendar. Senate bills now on passage. Senate Bill 1066.
Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I now move that Senate Bill 1066 pass, and speaking to that motion.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, Senate Bill 1066 is the bill that tries to address what was the wrong conviction of Keith Harward, the gentleman who we recognized here in the Senate gallery not too long ago. Senate Bill 1066 enables wrongful convictions based on what is now determined and later determined to be junk science to be subject to review by our Court of Appeals. There is no other way to have these reviewed. Keith Harward was convicted on bad bite mark evidence. Right now, the only way that he was acquitted or found to be actually innocent is the only way you can have your conviction overturned after the 21-day rule in Virginia. The only thing that saved Keith Harward was DNA. But right now what we're seeing as science develops is science is being used and accepted in our courthouses and our courtrooms, and it's later discredited. And yet when it's later discredited and that was the main course in which that person was convicted, that person under the strict rules that we have of finality cannot challenge that discredited evidence. Here what this bill does in a nutshell is if that person pled not guilty, went to trial, or tendered an Alford plea being they're pleading not guilty but they're taking the benefit of the bargain that's in front of them, then if it's later determined that junk science was used to convict that person or was the mainstay of that case, they can petition the Court of Appeals, one petition, and have the Court of Appeals look at the case. If the Court of Appeals determines that that junk science was the basis of that conviction, they can vacate that conviction and the Commonwealth is allowed to either retry that person without the junk science present or to not retry that person. Ultimately, we must understand, Mr. President, as you do, as an attorney, as I do, that injustice is imperfect. Our system of justice is not perfect. And it is incumbent upon us to do what we can to make sure that not one innocent person spends a day, let alone 33 years in jail for a crime that he or she did not commit, like Keith Harward so did. So for those reasons, Mr. President, and I want to remind the body that on more than one occasion, and most recently for 4 cases where junk science was found to have been wrongly convicting people in our jails, the Commonwealth of Virginia has paid $6.8 million taxpayer dollars to those wrongly accused. Mr. Davis, the Norfolk Four, Mr. Harward, Mr. McAllister. Let's try to get it right. We owe it to the people of the Commonwealth. We owe it as we try to make a more perfect union and more perfect justice. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1066? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1066 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 38, noes 2.
Ayes 38, noes 2. Senate Bill 1066 passes.
Senate Bill 1130.
Senator from Hampton, Senator Locke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate Bill 1130 pass. And speaking to that,
Senator has the floor.
Senate Bill 1130 references training for school resource officers, especially those who work with children with disabilities, mental health needs, and trauma experiences. The substitute just makes the subject-specific training areas an option rather than a mandate. Again, I move that the bill pass.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1130? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1130 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 0.
Ayes 39, noes 0. Senate Bill 1130 passes.
Senate Bill 1218.
Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Mr. President, I move that the bill pass, and speaking briefly to that motion.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I've spoken to the senator from Loudoun County. I think he understands the bill. This is a bill that I've been working with the administration on for some time. They support the bill. It just ensures that we will have the proper SOLs in the proper order, and I would hope that we would pass the bill.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is Senator from Alexandria? Senator Eben Rise.
I apologize for not asking the patron before, but I wanted to ask if he would yield for a question.
I yield.
Senator yields. You have the floor.
I would ask the gentleman if this adds any SOLs beyond what we already have.
I would answer the gentleman, no, it does not. We did put into the budget last year that we would make sure that we would have the social studies SOL, and that continues on. And the board is thinking about going back and forth on writing as well, so it ensures that the writing is in there. What it does do, and maybe what I would rather not do, is it does make a pathway where there's a possibility to get rid of an enormous number of tests. So basically you'll have math, history, science, and English, and that's basically, and writing, and that's all. And all those tests, including Algebra 2, Algebra 3, Geometry, all the other tests will be at the discretion of the board, and we could potentially get this to a place where we really just had the basics, which we had many years ago.
I thank the gentleman.
Thanks, Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1218? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1218 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 40, noes 0.
Ayes 40, noes 0. Senate Bill 1218 passes.
Senate Bill 1321.
Senator from Augusta, Senator Hanger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill pass. I'd like to speak to that.
Thanks, Senator. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate. Senate Bill 1321 addresses an issue in licensed family day homes concerning storage of firearms. What it does is essentially codify what is now in regulation, and it was brought to my attention as we reviewed some things working on licensing of these types of child care facilities, that this we had a mother who presented herself who had lost a child in one of these facilities where there was a loaded gun left unlocked, and unfortunately the child lost his life. This mirrors the regulation. There has been some concern from both sides. Essentially what it says is that they have to comply with all federal and state laws regarding firearms and ammunition, but specifically, all firearms and ammunition shall be stored in a locked closet, cabinet, or container during the family day home's hours of operation, and the key or combination to the locked closet, cabinet, or container shall be maintained out of the reach of children in the home. 2 points, one on both sides. It's kind of we have to hit the right spot for legislation like this. There had been concern on one hand from gun advocates that wanted to make sure that we didn't unduly restrict people who had the right to bear arms in an appropriate way. So we're not addressing that at all. This just speaks specifically, kind of replicating what's already in the regulation, which then, of course, gives the department more authority in regulating the licensed entities. The other issue that has been raised recently, and I think perhaps it was raised in committee, was that there are some localities that were concerned that by putting this in statute that it might infringe on some localities, specifically in Northern Virginia, I believe Fairfax, maybe Arlington and Alexandria, which may have more stringent regulations in place. And I'd like to speak to that briefly, Mr. President, because some have been around for quite some time, recognize that I've been a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and I carried in 2002, I carried it years before that, but in 2002 I was successful in getting a preemption bill through, which essentially says that the localities cannot enact more stringent ordinances in their local codes than authorized by state code. In other words, it was called a preemption law, and that's been in effect since 2002. At that time, we grandfathered some of these localities that already had taken those actions, and so that still stands in place, and this bill does not speak to that, nor does it infringe on their ability to maintain those more stringent regulations. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. What purpose, Senator from Eastern Fairfax? Senator Sierra Rise.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Senator Yield?
Yes, I'd be pleased to yield,
you have the floor.
Just so I'm clear, we talked about it in committee, but I don't think you were there to be able to present or hear the exact question. But my recollection is that about 12 years ago, this body or the legislature adopted language giving localities the option of prohibiting firearms in home child care. And that was after your 2002 preemption bill, so the grandfathering wouldn't kick in for that. And I just wanted to make sure that we're crystal clear that by passing this bill, that we're not overriding the local authority we gave those localities to prohibit firearms in those home-based child cares. Because I'm pretty sure, as you said, Fairfax and I think Alexander Arlington may have used that authority that was given, I want to say, in maybe 2008 or 9. I'm not 100% sure of the date, but that's my memory of it.
Mr. President, I would respond to the senator from Eastern Fairfax to say that I am not totally clear on that, or at least I can't 100% represent that, but it's my understanding that since we're not addressing this in this particular bill, that it goes no further than to what it says, and that it would not infringe on something previously authorized.
Just one further question.
Senator Yield?
Yes, I'd be pleased to yield.
You have the floor. Just
so we're crystal clear, in the case this ever comes up, it's not your intent to try to limit or restrict that in any way. Is that a fair statement?
Mr. President, I would say that is a fair statement. It is not my intent to infringe on those previously authorizations granted by state code, and I would make that very clear.
Okay. I thank the gentleman.
Thanks, Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1321? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1321 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 35, noes 4.
Ayes 35, noes 4. Senate Bill 1321 passes.
Senate Bill 1331.
Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I now move that Senate Bill 1331 pass, and speaking to that motion.
Thank you, Senator. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. As brief as I can possibly make it from the senator from Chesapeake, I will make it this way. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an epidemic going on in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and it's an infrastructure problem that affects our ability in the 21st century to attract businesses and make sure that we're delivering a 21st century education to our children. That infrastructure is our schools. And no matter what the zip code, no matter what region, everybody who sits in this body has a crumbling school in their district right now. And quite frankly, our localities, as they're hampered in what they can do in terms of generating revenue and the money that they have, need the state help. So we created a subcommittee, which I'm honored to have served with so many, a bipartisan subcommittee out of the local government committee in the Senate. And we went around Virginia, all parts of Virginia, and we saw this for ourselves. And so from that, we have created some bills for the Virginia Public School Modernization Act. This is one of those bills. What Senate Bill 1331 does is give the localities a tool in the toolbox where they can enter into lease purchase agreements with companies. They can enter into purchase agreements with companies. They can actually create new modern school buildings that have the use of solar in terms of generating power. And in terms of generating that power, they can also then, if it's a net meter gain, sell that power back to the utility and defray their cost of electricity, defray the cost of the building, and make sure that their children are living in the most modern 21st century environment as possible. We must take the first steps. Our inner cities and our rural areas are suffering from the same problem. And when they can't get the education that they deserve, that we're giving our children up in Northern Virginia, then it is an unequal education. We owe it to those children to give those localities, those inner cities, those rural areas, those county cities and towns, this ability to have the opportunity to pay for a brand new school in this methodology. So for those reasons, Mr. President, I again renew my motion that Senate Bill 1331 pass.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1331? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1331 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 1.
Ayes 39, noes 1. Senate Bill 1331 passes.
Senate Bill 1352.
Senator from Hanover, Senator McDougal.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that Senate Bill 1352 pass. And speaking to the motion,
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, this is the bill that creates the Office of Medicaid Fiscal Oversight and Accountability. Mr. President, I'll be brief in my comments. We had a situation where the Medicaid forecast was missed by almost $500 million. And Mr. President, certainly the current director was not here when that forecast was created, and the current agency is working very diligently to try to make sure that a mistake like that does not happen again. But Mr. President, Medicaid has become one of, if not the largest growth factor in our budget. And for us to be able to make sure we make good decisions, we need to be able to rely on those numbers. Mr. President, the creation of this office would require a monthly tracking, reporting to the legislature and executive and to the public so we could anticipate trends, know about them as they are having, and make sure that we have accurate numbers. Mr. President, certainly the individuals currently in the department now are taking some tremendous steps forward. But to ensure that systemically we don't have this situation again, we need to make sure that we have an independent agency that is consistent and reliable as we continue to craft our budgets. Mr. President, as we look at the challenges that we have financially, and certainly we'll take up the budget at the end of the week, if we had had different accurate numbers, we could have been having a much different conversation about the priorities in spending and where we could put our resources this year. So with that, Mr. President, I renew my motion that the bill pass.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is Senator from Fairfax City, Senator Petersen rise?
Gentleman, yield for a question.
Will the Senator yield?
Potentially.
Potentially. Senator has the floor.
I would ask the gentleman, is he a believer in small government?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I would answer the gentleman yes. That's why I took the positions out of the current agency and moved them to the new agency so there would not be an additional expenditure of money. We're just making sure that it's independent. The governor would appoint, the legislature would confirm the director.
Further question,
Mr. Chair.
Further question. Senator Yield?
Yield.
Senator Yields.
That the best way to solve a problem is to create a new state agency.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, the best way to solve this problem is to make sure that everyone, the members of this body, the one down the hall, the executive branch, and the public are looking at accurate numbers and making decisions on accurate information. Mr. President, we did not have accurate numbers. You can debate why we did not have accurate numbers, but there is no dispute that they were not accurate. This would ensure that we have accuracy in the future.
Further question, Mr. President.
Further question, Senator Yield?
Getting to the end of the list, Mr. President.
Senator Yields, you have the
floor. Would you agree with me that the growth of government is a problem?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I would say that government growth continues, but that's not relevant to this piece of legislation because it does not grow government.
I'll speak to the bill at the appropriate time.
That'll be right now.
That'll be right now. Okay.
Senator has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't mean to tease my fellow member of the House of 2001 class in the House of Delegates because I know he's a good conservative, but I just note that, yes, we did have an issue with Medicaid. Yes, we did miss it. Yes, we do already have an auditor and inspector general in our state government right now. But the solution to this problem with DMAS is apparently creating yet another state agency. Is that how we solve problems? We create state agencies? Or do we more efficiently utilize our existing agencies? I think we ought to more efficiently utilize our existing agencies. Thank you.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose does the junior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D. Steph, rise?
Mr. Senator, speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Speaking in favor of the bill. This is what happens when you underestimate actuarial liabilities to overestimate savings. When you mislead individuals, you have to have oversight, and I support this fine bill.
Thank the Senator. For what? Do any senators other than the patron wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1352? Seeing none, Senator from Hanover, Senator McDougal.
Mr. President, just to wrap up, I was not clear apparently. Mr. President, this does not create new positions. This takes positions out of one agency, puts them into a new agency where they will be independent. They will not be under the executive branch. They will not be under the legislative branch. It'll be independent, but not new positions.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall Senate Bill 1352 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 22, noes 18.
Ayes 22, noes 18. Senate Bill 1352 passes.
Senate Bill 1369.
Senator from James City County. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that the Senate bill pass, please, sir.
Senator has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, this is a fairly simple bill. For those of us that practice law, we frequently deal with what we call the statute of limitations. That is a defined period of time within which a cause of action or lawsuit may be initiated. There has been an exception since the beginning of time, and that is at many occasions in the absence of specific statutory language. There is no statute of limitations for a government or a public body. What this bill does is it creates a statute of limitations in the construction industry. And what it says is that if, in fact, there is going to be a lawsuit or a claim made on a construction contract that involves a public body, with the exception of VDOT, that there's a 5-year statute of limitations from when the project was completed. There's an exception to it, and that is what we call a latent defect, and that's a latent defect which is not immediately conspicuous or obvious. It provides that if there's a latent defect, that a cause of action must be brought within 5 years from the date of discovery of that latent defect, but no later than 10 years. And it also deals with a warranty or a bond provision on a construction project. There's usually a performance bond or guarantee, and it says that any claim for a warranty or a bond must come within 1 year of the breach of the discovery that would invoke that warranty. With that, I'd move the bill pass.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1369? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1369 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 0, Rule 36-1.
Ayes 39, noes 0, Rule 36-1. Senate Bill 1369 passes.
Senate Bill 1406.
Senator from Petersburg, Senator Dance.
Mr. President, I move that the bill pass and speak into the bill.
Senator has the floor.
This Senate Bill 1406 comes as an administration bill with the goal of achieving Virginia's standards of quality for school counselor ratios to meet the national recognized best practice levels. That would be the goal, that over a 3-year period that this would occur, that we would go from what is now 500 down to a 250 school counselor per student at each grade level. The recommendation also is supported by the Board of Education, the Governor's Northam's Children's Cabinet Work Group, the other school safety work groups that have been formed. The Speaker has one, and Chesterfield School Safety Task Force, for which I was honored to serve as a member. Again, Mr. President, I ask that the bill pass.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1406? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1406 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 1.
Ayes 39, noes 1. Senate Bill 1406 passes.
Senate Bill 1435.
The junior senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate Bill 1435 pass, and speaking to that.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The bill creates the authority for the Commissioner of Social Services to summarily suspend the license of a child welfare agency when conditions or practices exist that pose an immediate and substantial threat to the health, safety, and welfare of children receiving care. This basically creates the same power, authority, and process that the Commissioner currently has for assisted living facilities. And with that explanation, I renew my motion.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1435? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1435 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 40, noes 0.
Ayes 40, noes 0. Senate Bill 1435 passes.
Senate Bill 1470.
Senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards.
Mr. President, I move that Senate Bill 1470 pass. This is a mere shadow of itself. All it is to direct the Secretary of Transportation to evaluate the impact of increased fuel efficiency and increased use of hybrid and electric vehicles, and evaluate the potential options to provide a sustainable funding stream for the transportation infrastructure of the Commonwealth, and report back by December the 10th of this year. With that explanation, I move that this sort of a bill pass.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1470? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1470 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 25, noes 15.
Ayes 25, noes 15. Senate Bill 1470 passes.
Senate Bill 1491.
Senator from Russell, Senator Chafin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the bill pass. And speaking to the bill,
Senator, you have the floor.
A few moments ago, I yielded to the questions from the senator from Alexandria and explained this bill substantially. This bill came on request of some school divisions out in Southwest Virginia, and the bill simply allows, under a very restrictive language, the ability for certain family members of a superintendent of schools to be hired by that school division. Ultimately, the hiring authority for school divisions is in the hands of the school board members, and they vote to hire and fire individuals who are employed in school divisions pursuant to Virginia Code provisions. And this simply would allow a mechanism whereby, in certain instances, a family member of a superintendent could be hired.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1491? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1491 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 38, noes 2.
Ayes 38, noes 2. Senate Bill 1491 passes.
Senate Bill 1519.
Senator from Grayson, Senator Carrico.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the bill pass. Speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, Senate Bill 1519 is a bill that allows the University of Virginia at Wise to offer a reduced rate tuition to students that live within the Appalachian Regional Commission area into other states. Currently, Kentucky and Tennessee offer this to students, and we've seen a reduction in Virginia students because of the tuition rate that they were able to decrease it as. And also it adds Mountain Empire Community College to that list of community colleges to give them a 30-mile radius outside that region so that they're not affected by the tuition rate decrease. It would help the region and help recruitment to that college, and I hope it would be the pleasure of the body to pass the bill.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1519? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1519 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 38, noes 2.
Ayes 38, noes 2. Senate Bill 1519 passes.
Senate Bill 1587.
Senator from Roanoke County, Senator Suderline.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd move that the Senate pass Senate Bill 1587. And speaking to that briefly.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 1587 is a bill that came to me from one of my local school superintendents. The issue that we have is because the average daily membership's significant role in funding formula for how much money schools receive, the school divisions are incentivized to keep students there the full 12 or 13 years in the case of kindergarten, and they don't want the student to leave earlier and lose the money. But often it would be best for the student and even for the school division if a student who is already had everything they needed could go on their way. So what this bill seeks to do is add, it allows the average daily membership, that student who graduates early, to be factored into it. This is something that, especially with block scheduling, you'll see school divisions have government, which is usually in 12th grade, and English 12 be offered in different semesters to prevent a student from leaving early. So that's the sort of games that are being played, and that's the sort of thing that my bill is seeking to disincentivize. And so I hope it will be the pleasure of the body to pass the bill.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1587?
Mr. President, question from the patron.
Will the patron yield for a question?
It sounds like he wants to yield.
Certainly.
I don't know if he wants to yield, but the senator has the floor.
So if I understand it, you're saying that a school system is going to charge the state for a student not being there?
That is not what would be happening. What would be happening is the Commonwealth would be choosing to remit payment for a student that would have regularly been enrolled through the 12th grade during the duration of those students' class cohorts being enrolled at the school. So this is saying if a student manages to do all 13 years and 12 years, the Commonwealth is still going to provide the funding for that 13th year for that student so that we don't keep going the path that we're currently on, which is encouraging the schools to play games.
Further question?
Yes, Mr. There's a lot of words, Mr. President, with the response, and perhaps we can narrow it down. So in the scenario that the patron proposes, there's an empty seat, and the Commonwealth is going to pay that school system for that empty seat in, say, year 12.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President,
13.
The bill exists to incentivize helping schools get the students through it earlier. What currently is happening, and if this doesn't become law and we continue down the current path, we will pay, as a Commonwealth, to the school division. We will continue to encourage paying them for a student who only needs to come for government in the spring or for English 12 in the spring because we've incentivized that behavior. So if we want the schools to keep doing that, vote against the bill.
Further question? Senator, for what purpose is the senator from Southern Fairfax, Senator Barker, rise?
Mr. President, speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
As the only no vote in both the Education and Health Committee and the Finance Committee, I just want to explain my rationale. I think there are two aspects of the bill that the senator from Roanoke County has proposed, one of which I'm sympathetic to, the other of which I'm not. One is the one I'm sympathetic to is the one where someone goes through the first semester of senior year and then is eligible to graduate, and therefore doesn't have to be there for the spring semester. It seems to me that it's reasonable to give the school system credit for that because they've already hired this. They have to hire the staff and faculty and can't have staff leaving at the middle of the year because a couple of students graduated early. What I'm not sympathetic to is if a student graduates a year early, getting full credit the following year for that student having been there when they were not there at all during the year, because there is an opportunity to size your faculty in advance and be able to ensure that you're not having to hire additional faculty for people who weren't there. And so that's why I have voted against this provision in both of the two committees where it came up, and will do so again today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1587?
Just briefly,
Senator from Roanoke County, Senator Line, you have the floor.
I was glad that it went on the path it did, so the senator from Southern Fairfax got to have that experience that I spoke to earlier of being the lone vote, and he got to have that experience twice. If it doesn't pass through and become law this year, I have an idea that this bill will be back in the future, and perhaps you can offer an amendment. But hopefully we'll get it going to the other end of the Capitol today. Hope the bill passes.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall Senate Bill 1587 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 27, noes 13.
Ayes 27, noes 13. Senate Bill 1587 passes.
Senate Bill 1590.
Senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move the bill pass and speak to that bill.
Thank you, Senator. You have the floor.
Mr. President, this bill works to expand virtual education in Virginia through the Department of Education, and it would specifically allow expansion to teach all classes K to 12 instead of now where we are just in high school. It also will allow schools and school divisions to participate in more than 15 per course by paying a nominal fee for each additional student that participates, which will in itself pay for the expansion in the courses. These schools will get to keep their ADM, so there will be no loss to them, but that is what the bill aspires to do.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1590? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1590 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 1.
Ayes 39, noes 1. Senate Bill 1590 passes.
Senate Bill 1680.
Senator from Williamsburg, Senator Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move Senate Bill 1680 pass and speak in the motion.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members, about a year or so ago, our transit systems put in place Operation Assist and Allocation methodology of funding to try to make them more efficient, to try to make them do to incent them to do the things we want to do and just get every dollar to go as far as they could. Of the 39 systems, only 9 of them came out negatively impacted, 5 or 6 within 1 or 2%. But that dollar amount was pretty high for those 5 or 6, Mr. President. So this bill asks DRPT to, for 1 year, because they're in the midst of doing their contracts for next year, starting July 1, DRPT is going to give them an allocated out of their $10 million reserve. For 1 year, they're going to cover up to $3 million in losses stemming from this funding formula and continue to work with some of the systems that have been adversely impacted on a go forward. So with that, Mr. President, I ask the bill pass.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1680? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1680 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 35, noes 2.
Ayes 35, noes 5.
5, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Senate Bill 1680 passes.
Senate Bill 1689.
Senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move the bill pass and speak to the bill.
Thank the Senator. You have the floor.
Senate Bill 1689 is Benefits Consortium. This is a bill that we saw last year and passed out of the Senate and actually went to the governor's desk before it was vetoed. It's good policy. It's good policy we've already endorsed in Virginia, Mr. President, because independent colleges and the bankers already have Benefits Consortium. And this bill is an attempt to give some relief to individuals that are paying extraordinarily high rates on their taxes. There is evidence that when a purchaser of insurance moves from the individual marketplace where our families are being crushed with payments on their premiums to a benefits consortium, which is that large group self-insured kind of plan we talked about before that could be housed at any membership organization, they can save up to $10,000 a year. In fact, that's the average, Mr. President, that families would save if they were able to purchase insurance just simply in this other arena. And so I'm very sensitive to the injustice that there are some for whom this is available and not others. And I think that we should pass this bill and give the opportunity of other Virginians to save that money and use it the way they see fit.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1689? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1689 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 28, noes 12.
Ayes 28, noes 12. Senate Bill 1689 passes.
Senate Bill 1709.
Senator from Lynchburg, Senator Peake.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the bill pass and speaking to the bill.
Thank the Senator. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. This is a very common sense freedom bill. This involves distillers and goes in conjunction with a bill that senator from Spotsylvania has already put through rehab and social services. What this bill does, currently distillers have to send 100% of their previous month's gross sales to the ABC board and then wait approximately 30 to 45 days to get their portion of the money back. This has been referred to as the net 30. This forces distillers to carry 2 months of operating capital while waiting for their first month's revenue to come back to them. This bill eliminates that requirement so that distilleries do not have to send their whole portion to the ABC, just the portion that ABC is owed. The second part of this bill deals with transfer fees. Currently, distilleries pay ABC $2 per case of alcohol that is moved. Unfortunately, in this case, the alcohol is actually stored at the distilleries. The distilleries' employees move the alcohol from the back of their distillery to the display room where it is sometimes tasted. And currently, they're having to pay ABC $2 for their own employees moving their own alcohol at their own facility. This bill addresses that, and I ask that it pass.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1709? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1709 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 0.
Ayes 39, noes 0. Senate Bill 1709 passes.
Senate Bill 1716.
Senator from Rockingham, Senator Obenshain.
Mr. President, I move that the bill pass. And
Senator has the
speaking
floor.
to the bill, this is the 81 corridor bill. The controversial provisions, in other words, the meaningful provisions, the funding provisions have been removed from the bill. What this bill basically does is it creates an unfunded, non-reverting fund. So when funds are found or diverted to it, we have a repository for expenditure of funds to fund the corridor improvement program, which was developed over the course of the past year in an exhaustive process of public hearings by the Department of Transportation. It also creates a corridor improvement panel, which is represented by legislators from the Senate, House, and others along the Interstate 81 corridor. So it provides a means of keeping alive the hard work that the Secretary of Transportation, the Department of Transportation, and many up and down the Interstate 81 corridor put together over the course of the past year. And hopefully we can find a way to break the logjam and fund some of the safety improvements that have been recommended. But that's not part of this bill.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1716? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1716 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 36, noes 2.
Ayes 36, noes 2. Senate Bill 1716 passes.
Senate Bill 1738.
Senator from Spotsylvania, Senator Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the bill.
Thank you, Senator. You have the floor.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This bill is a bill that clarifies existing code for prosecution of illegal gambling by specifically declaring illegal these so-called sham sweepstakes machines. It goes kind of hand in hand with Senate Bill 1671 as part of all the folks that were carrying the charitable gaming stuff. So this would allow law enforcement the opportunity to actually go after and prosecute the other machines and establishments that aren't doing it the right way. It does have the support of the FOP, the VFW, and some of the other folks. I ask the bill pass.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1738? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1738 pass? All in favor will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 40, noes 0.
Ayes 40, noes 0. Senate Bill 1738 passes.
Senate Bill 1750.
Senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the passage of the bill.
Thank the Senator. You have the floor.
Yes, sir. Speaking to the bill, Mr. President, what this bill does is authorizes a locality who imposes an assessment on the local hospitals to transfer those funds to DMAS, and then DMAS will obtain the federal match under the approved state plan amendment. This does not require expenditures of any state or local dollars. This bill only applies to the hospitals who participate in the two-state plan amendments. And in this case specifically, we're talking about Southampton Memorial Hospital in the city of Franklin and Southern Virginia Regional Medical Center in the city of Emporia. And again, Mr. President, I move passage of the bill.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1750? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1750 pass? All in favor will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 1.
Ayes 39, noes 1. Senate Bill 1750 passes.
Senate Bill 1759.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Sorrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill pass. And speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 1759 basically creates a pilot program to fund underground utilities in a transit-oriented development in Fairfax County. It only applies in Fairfax County. It's only paid for by people in Fairfax County. It only has to do with Fairfax County. The county, under this pilot, would be required to front any money to pay for this. The money could be recouped by an assessment on utility tax bills for people who live in the county. It's something we've been seeking to get something done here for 3 or 4 years now. Both myself, the senator from Alexandria, the senator from Southern Fairfax, I would hope the bill pass. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has them.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1759? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1759 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 32, noes 8.
Ayes 32, noes 8. Senate Bill 1759 passes.
Senate Bill 1763.
The senior senator from Richmond City, Senator Sturdivant.
Mr. President, I move that the bill pass. And speaking to the bill.
Thank the Senator. You have the floor.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, if you are on Commerce and Labor or Finance, you have heard this bill already a couple of times. This is the bill that would prohibit balance billing in emergency medical services. Some people call it balance billing. Others call it surprise billing. But it is the practice that I'm sure many, if not all of you, have heard from your constituents. And it usually works out like this. Someone has chest pain or is in a car accident or a child is injured. They go to the emergency room at their hospital that covers their health insurance. But unbeknownst to them, the doctor that's assigned to them at the emergency room is not a doctor, for whatever reason, who is covered by their health insurance. And then only later do those patients get a huge bill in the mail that they never expected because they were at a hospital that was covered by their health insurance. And this is what is surprise billing or balance billing. And it's unfair and it hurts patients, and that this bill prohibits that balance billing in the emergency medical services context. This bill also removes patients from the payments that are made from insurers to doctors. It takes patients out of that process and just has the insurers and the doctors deal with each other directly. Right now, there are some cases where the insurance company will send the money to the patient and then the patient has to deal with the doctor. This bill removes the patient out of that process. And then lastly, I think one of the important things here is that it ensures that patients will be covered for emergency services regardless of the final diagnosis. And that is oftentimes very important in situations, especially where if someone thinks they're having a heart attack, they're having chest pain, They go to the emergency room, and it turns out that they were not having a heart attack, and they get balance billed. This will not hold that person responsible for that larger bill if it did not turn out to be an emergency. And then lastly, what this bill does is it helps to set a cap on what out-of-service emergency room doctors will be paid by using publicly available rates that are provided to the Bureau of Insurance. It develops an average based on the region of the hospital where the care is provided, so that there is some transparency and also some incentive to prevent emergency room doctors from going out of network. Right now, they have the ability to balance bill, and so they have the greatest incentive to remain out of network right now because they can essentially bill for whatever they want, and this bill would prevent that. And that is essentially the bill, Mr. President, and I'd ask that it would pass.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the senior senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just speak briefly to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, you'll see there were 2 no votes out of Commerce and Labor. It's myself and my good friend, Senator Spruill. This is a good bill. Our no votes were directed to the sending of this bill to the dreaded Finance Committee, where we were afraid of happening exactly what happened to it. The clause is on the bill. So we anxiously await the final budget to see that the language is in the budget so this bill can become law. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the Senator from Western Fairfax, Senator Marsden, rise?
Speak to the bill, sort of.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a great bill, and this is a problem that has long since needed to be solved. I just would add that there's a similar problem in the medevac world of helicopters, except it's not surprise billing, it's surprise bankruptcy. Talking about getting a bill for $32,000. Now, the FAA controls this. There's a lot of thorny problems to be solved there, but I appreciate the senior senator from Richmond solving this half of the problem, but we still have a ways to go, and I don't know exactly how to solve that problem, but it's one that needs our attention, and we will have hit a double-double here if we can get both of those. Thank you.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1763? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1763 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 40, no 0.
Ayes 40, no 0. Senate Bill 1763 passes.
No. I'll leave yours alone.
Senator from Fauquier, Senator Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am not distracted by the peanut gallery over here. Thank you, Mr. President. Having voted on the prevailing side by which we passed Senate Bill 1778, I would like to please ask that that be reconsidered, and then just by way of a brief explanation, if I may. This was a bill that we debated yesterday. It dealt with health regulatory boards and conversion therapy, and it was introduced by the senator from Bedford. They say he who hesitates is lost, and many of you will recall that I hesitated momentarily yesterday and asked that that bill go by temporarily because I had some concerns and a little bit of a misunderstanding about that bill and how it might work. Fortunately, I was able to get that bill back before it was transmitted, and the patron has been incredibly gracious to indulge me and a few others in attempting to address some of those concerns. And so with that, I would just renew my motion that the bill please be reconsidered. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Question is, shall the vote by which Senate Bill 1778 passed be reconsidered? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 40, noes 0.
Ayes 40, noes 0. The motion is agreed to.
Mr. President.
Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Mr. President, with that bill now back before us, I would move that the bill be recommitted to the Committee on Education and Health, and speaking briefly to that motion.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I appreciate working with Senator from Alexander, Fauquier, and Henrico about some of the language. We were unable to come up with the language that does what I want to do and what the concerns of others are, and as a result, I'm asking that the bill go back to committee. Mr. President, as you'll recall, the board is planning to have regulations. If the regulations come back in such a way that I fear they were, but where others have told me they will not come, then I don't think we'll be back next year. But if they do, and there's just a clear violation of Virginia's Religious Liberty Act, then I think we'll have to come back. But, Mr. President, for now, I'm looking forward to our committee studying the matter and getting it right, and I would hope we would send it back to committee.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall Senate Bill 7... Question is, shall Senate Bill 1778 be recommitted to the Committee on Education and Health? All those in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 1778 will be recommitted to the Committee on Education and Health.
Yes. Now I would like
Senator from
to speak.
Lynchburg, Senator P.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. Having voted on the prevailing side by which Senate Bill 1759 was passed, I ask that we reconsider that bill.
Okay. That's on page 37.
On page 37, yes, sir.
Okay. The question is, shall the vote by which Senate Bill 1759 passed be reconsidered? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 40, noes 0.
Ayes 40, noes 0. The motion is agreed to. Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Servell.
Mr. President, having previously explained this bill, I would move the bill pass and hope we pass this bill I've been working on for almost 10 years.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall Senate Bill 1759 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 29, noes 11.
Ayes 29, noes 11. Senate Bill 1759 passes.
Uncontested calendar, Senate bills on first reading. Senate Bill 1100, a bill which appropriated funds for the 2018-20 biennium and to provide a portion of revenues for the 2 years ending respectively on the 30th day of June 2019 and the 30th day of June 2020. Senate Bill 1265, a bill relating to the Department of Veterans Services Virginia War Memorial Division. Reported from the Committee on General Laws and Technology.
The junior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D. Staff.
Good afternoon, Mr. President.
Good afternoon, Senator.
I request we suspend the rules and dispense with the second constitutional reading.
Thanks, Senator. The question is, shall the rules be suspended and the second constitutional reading be dispensed with? All those in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 40, noes 0.
Ayes 40, noes 0. The rules are suspended and the second constitutional reading is dispensed with. The junior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D. Staff.
Mr. President, I request we move this forward, engross it, and advance it to its third constitutional reading.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed and advanced to its third constitutional reading? All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and advanced to its third reading. Junior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D. Staff.
Mr. President, I move we dispense of the third constitutional reading.
Okay. All right. Question is, shall the rules be suspended and the third constitutional reading be dispensed with? All those in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senator desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 40, no 0.
Ayes 40, no 0. The rules are suspended and the third constitutional reading is dispensed with. The junior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D-Step.
Mr. President, I move passage of this fine bill.
Does the senator want to speak to it?
And speaking to this wonderful bill, Mr. President,
the floor.
What this bill does is it adds names to the homes of recorded names and homes of the recorded designation of Virginia's missing in action as a result of the Vietnam War and all other Virginians who served honorably but who do not meet the criteria for placement on the Shrine of Memory and are required to be honored elsewhere in the Virginia War Memorial. The bill also provides that the Board of Veteran Services will advise the Department of Veteran Services on policies related to the War Memorial. This advisory authority currently rests with the Virginia War Memorial Board. With that, Mr. President, I move this fine bill pass.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1265? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1265 pass? All in favor will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 40, no 0.
Ayes 40, no 0. Senate Bill 1265 passes.
Uncontested calendar, Senate joint resolutions on second reading.
Senator from James City County, Senator Norment.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would now move that all of the Senate joint resolutions on the second reading on the uncontested calendar, which would include all Senate bills on pages 39 through 41, including Senate Joint Resolution 254 through Senate Joint Resolution 338, be engrossed in advance to the third reading in the block after the adoption of any amendments. Any senator who may desire to remove a resolution from the block should please do so after the clerk has read the number of that resolution.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall all Senate joint resolutions on second reading on the uncontested calendar on pages 39 through 41, Senate Joint Resolution 254 through Senate Joint Resolution 338 be engrossed in advance to the third reading in the block after the adoption of any amendments thereto, and that any senator desiring a bill be removed from the block do so after the clerk has read the number of the resolution. All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to.
Senate Joint Resolution 254, reported from the Committee on Rules with amendments.
Senator from Loudoun, Senator Black.
Mr. President, I move the committee amendments.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee amendments are agreed to.
Senate Joint Resolution 272, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Joint Resolution 276, reported from the Committee on Rules with amendment.
Senator from Spotsylvania, Senator Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move the committee amendment.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee amendment be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee amendment is adopted.
Senate Joint Resolution 277, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Joint Resolution 286, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Joint Resolution 287, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Joint Resolution 289, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Joint Resolution 298, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Joint Resolution 299, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Joint Resolution 301, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Joint Resolution 309, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Joint Resolution 311, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Joint Resolution 314, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Joint Resolution 338, reported from the Committee on Rules with a substitute.
Senator from Accomack, Senator Lewis.
Mr. President, move the committee substitute.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee substitute be adopted? All those in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is adopted. The question is, shall the Senate joint resolutions be engrossed in advance to their third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The joint resolutions are engrossed in advance to their third reading. Senator from James City County, Senator Norment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would now move that the rules of the Senate be suspended and that the third constitutional reading of the titles of the Senate joint resolutions be dispensed with and they be placed on their final passage in the block. Any senator desiring to remove a Senate joint resolution from the block should please do so after the clerk has read the number.
Okay. The question is, shall the rules be suspended and the third reading of the titles of the resolutions be waived? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 40, no 0.
Ayes 40, no 0. The reading of the titles is waived. The resolutions are now before the Senate for final consideration. Senator from James City County, Senator Norment.
Mr. President, I would now move that the resolutions be agreed to.
Thanks, Senator. We need to put them in a block first for final passage.
Mr. President, I would now move that all the Senate joint resolutions on the third reading uncontested calendar be placed on that final passage in the block. Any senator who desires to remove one may please do so after the clerk has read the number.
Thanks, Senator. Question is, shall the Senate joint resolutions on the uncontested calendar, third reading, pages 39 through 41, Senate Joint Resolution 254 through Senate Joint Resolution 338, be placed upon their final passage in the block, with the understanding that any senator desiring a resolution be removed from the block will do so after the clerk has read the number of the resolution. All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The resolutions are before us in the block. The clerk will read the number of the resolutions.
Senate Joint Resolution 254, Senate Joint Resolution 272, Senate Joint Resolution 276, Senate Joint Resolution 277, Senate Joint Resolution 286, Senate Joint Resolution 287, Senate Joint Resolution 289, Senate Joint Resolution 298, Senate Joint Resolution 299, Senate Joint Resolution 301, Senate Joint Resolution 309, Senate Joint Resolution 311, Senate Joint Resolution 314, Senate Joint Resolution 338.
Question is, shall the resolutions be agreed to in a block? All in favor of agreeing to the resolutions will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolutions in the block are agreed to.
Regular calendar, Senate Joint Resolution on second reading. Senate Joint Resolution 297, acknowledging with profound regret the existence and acceptance of lynching within the Commonwealth. Reported from the Committee on Rules with a substitute.
Junior Senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the committee substitute be adopted.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the committee substitute be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is adopted.
Mr. President, I move that the resolution be engrossed and advanced to its third reading.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the resolution be engrossed and advanced to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is engrossed and advanced to its third reading.
Mr. President, I move that we now waive the third reading.
Question is, shall the third reading of the joint resolution be waived? Those in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senator desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 40, no 0.
Ayes 40, no 0. The third reading is waived. Junior Senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the resolution be agreed to, and speaking briefly to that motion.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the title of the resolution acknowledges, the resolution acknowledges with profound regret the existence and acceptance of lynchings in the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is a dark and often overlooked part of our history. This is a recommendation of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Commission as part of our Lynching in Virginia project, where we will be working to compile information of all recorded lynchings, racial terror lynchings that occurred in the Commonwealth of Virginia,
in one place on our website, and we will work with the Equal Justice Initiative as part of their Community Remembrance Project to bring memorials that, in remembrance of each of the victims, to the localities where those lynchings occurred. We will work with them on their project to collect soil samples from the sites of recorded lynchings, and we will work with the Department of Historic Resources to identify sites for historic markers. The first such marker has already been approved for Charles City County. It's the first historic marker in the Commonwealth of Virginia recognizing a site of a lynching of a gentleman in Charles City County in the 9th District. And with that, I renew my motion.
Thank the Senator. Question is, shall Senate Joint Resolution 297 be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate Joint Resolution 297 is agreed to.
Turning to supplemental calendar number 1. Uncontested calendar, Senate bill on first reading, Senate Bill 1101, a bill relating to the Office of the Attorney General, representation of members of the General Assembly for violations of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act.
Junior Senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D. Steph.
Good afternoon again, Mr. President.
Good afternoon, Senator.
I request we suspend the rules and dispense with the second constitutional reading.
Question is, shall the rules be suspended and the second constitutional reading be dispensed with? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 0.
Ayes 39, noes 0. The rules are suspended and the second constitutional reading is dispensed with. Junior Senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D. Steph.
Mr. President, I move the committee amendments, the Finance Committee amendments.
Question is, shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee amendments are agreed to. The Junior Senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D. Steph.
Mr. President, I move we engross and advance to its third reading.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed and advanced to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and advanced to its third reading. Junior Senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D. Steph.
Mr. President, I move we dispense with the third constitutional reading.
Question is, shall the rules be suspended and the third constitutional reading be dispensed with? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 40, noes 0.
Ayes 40, noes 0. The rules are dispensed with, and the rules are suspended, and the third constitutional reading is dispensed with. The Junior Senator from Virginia Beach, Senator D. Steph.
Mr. President, I move this bill, and speaking to that.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, Senate Bill 1101 allows the Office of the Attorney General, when necessary, to provide outside counsel to represent a member of the General Assembly in any civil matter alleging that such member is in the official capacity of his job and has violated the Freedom of Information Act. And with that, Mr. President, I move passage of this bill.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on Senate Bill 1101? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 1101 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 1.
Ayes 39, noes 1. Senate Bill 1101 passes. Senator from King George, Senator Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that the rules be suspended and SR 106 be taken up for immediate consideration.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the rules be suspended and SR 106 be taken up for immediate consideration? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 39, no 0.
Ayes 39, no 0. The rules are suspended to take up the resolution for immediate consideration. The clerk will please read the title.
Senate Resolution Number 106, commending Helen Turner Murphy and W. Taylor Murphy, Jr.
Senator from King George, Senator Stewart.
Mr. President, this is the resolution naming Helen and Taylor Murphy the outstanding Virginians for the year. I just want to point out this is the second outstanding Virginian from my district in as much as 2 years. I'm a little proud of that. We'll honor them tomorrow, but with that, I'd ask we adopt the resolution.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the resolution be agreed to? All in favor of agreeing to the resolution will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The resolution is agreed to. Senator from James City County, Senator Norment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Inquiry of the clerk at 2:41 p.m. Does that complete the calendar?
Yes, sir.
Excellent, Mr. President. Excellent.
Well done, everyone. Is there any other business to come before the Senate? Seeing none, the clerk will report any announcements on the desk.
Today, Tuesday, February 5th, the Committee on Privileges and Elections will not meet. The Committee on Local Government will not meet. Tomorrow, Wednesday, February 6th, the Women's Legislative Roundtable will meet at 8:30 in the Tillman Room on the first floor of the SunTrust Center. The Committee on Finance will meet at 9 a.m., Committee Room B, Pocahontas. The Republican Caucus will meet at 11:30 a.m., Senate Room 2, or is that 10:30? Is it 10:30? The Republican Caucus will meet at 10:30 a.m. in Senate Room 2. The Democratic Caucus will meet at 10:30 a.m. in Senate Room 1.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Senator from Rockingham, Senator Obenshain.
Mr. President, I didn't jump fast enough. I rise for an announcement.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, as you are aware, there is one vacancy on the Supreme Court of Virginia, and tomorrow, statutorily ineligible. Tomorrow, at the beginning of the Courts of Justice Committee meeting, there will be brief interviews of 4 candidates who have expressed interest and asked to be interviewed at the beginning of the meeting. Anybody who is interested is encouraged to come. Actually, all of you are encouraged to come and listen to the interviews. I would hope that all of the Courts Committee members will be there for that, but this is an important opportunity to become informed about the candidates. So I would extend that invitation to every member.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the Senator from Grayson, Senator Carrico, rise?
Mr. President, I rise for a point of personal privilege and emotion.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President and members of the body, I rise with a heavy heart and to speak of another Virginia State Trooper killed in the line of duty and how important Senate Bill 1501 was yesterday that this body sent out. Last night, Trooper Lucas B. Dow, 28 years of age, and a member of the Virginia State Police Tactical Team was assisting the Piedmont Regional Drug and Gang Task Force with executing a search warrant at a residence in 1500 block of Cumberland Road and Route 45 just north of the town limits of Farmville. The TAC team had made an entry into the residence shortly before 10 p.m. on Monday when an adult male inside the residence began shooting them. The tactical team members returned fire and fatally wounded the male suspect. Trooper Dow was transported to Southside Community Hospital in Farmville, where he succumbed to his injuries. Trooper Dow becomes the department's 66th line of duty death, and Trooper Dow was from Chilhowie, Virginia, a native where he was a native and a graduate of the Virginia State Police Academy 122nd Basic School of November of 2014. Since his graduation, he had been assigned to the Virginia State Police Appomattox Division, and his assignments was in Area 20, where he patrolled the city of Lynchburg, Amherst, and Campbell County. He was also a member of the tactical team, and as you know, we have put forth efforts to make these men and women full-time teams. We have 2 in the state. We have 5 more to go. This helps them not to have to work the road and do dual duties so that they can be alert and able to handle these kind of situations. So what made Trooper Dow such a special guy? Like all young men and women who choose this profession, they're there to protect the people of this Commonwealth and to put their lives on the line every day that they go out there. And he selfishly did that last night. And in the words of John 15:13, greater love hath no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. Last night, there's 6 other members of that team alive because he laid his life down for them. Let me describe this young man. He's proud of his mother and father. Give me just a moment. Becky and Mike Dow, who've been my friends for 40 years. He had impeccable character. He was an outstanding athlete. He is a great brother to his sister Erica. He's the true image of a state trooper. For those of you that didn't know him, he's the Bill Stanley of the state police. He and my son were very good friends. And he used his humor to heal them. When a serious situation took place, he used that humor to heal their hearts and to show them that stress can be overcome by laughter. His teammates, this is their statement. He was an outstanding person and a great friend to us all. He always brought us a sense of humor in the darkest situations that we dealt with. We all loved him, and it's great, and it is a great loss to our team. He will never be. We never had to worry because Lucas always had our backs, and he was always there to pick us up in those situations. Many of you recall the story I told on this floor some years ago about the sheep and the sheepdog, and how the sheepdog is there to protect the sheep. And not always do the sheep like the sheepdogs, but the sheep knew that they were there to protect them from the wolves. And when the wolves come calling, the sheepdogs jump into action, and they will protect the sheep with their life. One thing that I didn't tell you is there's a shepherd in the field. And when the sheepdog is wounded, he takes him, he heals him. And when it's so severe, he takes him where he doesn't have to fight anymore. Where there's no more pain and there's final peace. And I move that when we adjourn, that we adjourn in honor and memory of Trooper Lucas B. Dow.
Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn until 11 a.m. tomorrow in memory of Trooper Lucas B. Dow.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the Senate stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow, and when we adjourn, we do so in the honor and memory of State Trooper Lucas B. Dow. All those in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The Senate stands adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.